Welcome to Gaslit Nation. I am your host, Andrea Chalupa, a journalist and filmmaker and the writer and producer of the journalistic thriller Mr. Jones, about Stalin's genocide famine in Ukraine, the film the Kremlin doesn't want you to see, so be sure to watch it. First, a couple announcements. We are running a very special summer series called The Future of Dictatorship: What's Next and Ways to Resist. This series features leading voices on the front lines of understanding AI, corporate surveillance, Silicon Valley greed, and more. Because the dictator's playbook remains the same, but the technology they have to oppress us keeps changing. You can learn more about the dictator's playbook in the Gaslit Nation graphic novel, Dictatorship: It's Easier Than You Think. You can join me for a special night out in New York City to talk all about the making of that book on Saturday, August 5th at 4 p.m. at the fun Lower East Side bar Caveat, where I will be in discussion with the comedian Kevin Allison of the hugely popular Risk Storytelling podcast. If you're not in New York, you can join us by live stream. This is a huge deal for me because I hardly go out. So this will be like a Gaslit Nation prom night. Join me at Caveat on August 5th in New York. Signed copies of the Gaslit Nation graphic novel will be available for order at the event. For details on how to join us in person or live stream, go to gaslitnationpod.com and you'll see the link right on our homepage with more information about the event. Go to gaslitnationpod.com. That's gaslitnationpod.com. We'll be back with all new episodes of Gaslit Nation in September, including a live taping with Terrell Starr of the Black Diplomats podcast, reporting from Ukraine. That's right, Terrell's going to be in Ukraine, and we're going to hear all about his summer, his reporting trips, what he's learning, who he's talking to, and what's next. That live taping will take place on Tuesday, September 12th at 12 p.m. Eastern for our supporters at the Truth Teller level and higher on Patreon. Come join us for that and drop questions in the chat. And hope to see as many of our listeners as I can on August 5th in New York at Caveat for a fun night out. Before we get to this week's guest, here's a quick word from our sponsor, Judge Lackey, the wily narrator of the new Gaslit Nation graphic novel, Dictatorship: It's Easier Than You Think.
Always champion the underdog. Dictators arise in times of economic and political instability, such as the aftermath of wars and recessions, and have a vulture-like instinct for capitalizing on people's pain. Learn more in the new book starring me, Judge Judge Lackey. Dictatorship: It's Easier Than You Think. Almost too easy.
Welcome to the Gaslit Nation presents The Future of Dictatorship. To start things off, we're looking at how technology is worsening the income inequality crisis in America and what to do about it. For that, meet this week's guests, the brilliant minds behind the must-watch documentary, Americonned, Inside America's Income Inequality Crisis, as told through the heroic grassroots power to unionize at Amazon in an age of AI. The film's director-producer is Sean Claffey, who has worked in the film industry on feature films, documentaries, and commercials for 25 years. And the writer and producer of Americonned, Dave Peterson, is also the producer of the Oscar-nominated film Super Size Me and the Cannes Award-winning The Third Wave. Before we get to our conversation, here's the trailer of their absolutely powerful must-watch film, Americonned.
We're on our way to show some solidarity with the union.
Yo, bro, you work for Amazon? You gonna vote for that union?
There just won't be enough jobs to give all Americans a decent, livable wage.
I want my kids to grow up in a society where they don't have to struggle as hard as we do. That's what we need to fight for.
I mean, our middle class is, I don't want to say it's gone, but it erodes every single day.
Do you think they're going to build any affordable housing here?
Oh, hell no.
I don't want to work 3 jobs, nights, weekends. I want a life.
The trick in trickle-down economics is getting you to believe that anything which is good for rich people is good for everyone, and anything that is good for everyone else will kill the economy.
A union agitator.
If they're not going to take care of their employees, somebody has to.
They don't invest in us. They don't show us the resources.
It's just not sustainable. The system is gonna collapse.
We gotta take care of ourselves. We can't rely on the government, and we damn sure can't rely on the 1% class. What the hell?
This is union busting one-on-one.
They're gonna spend millions of dollars just to stop that.
The voting wrapping up. Now employees are waiting on results.
If successful, it could spark a labor movement across the country.
Look at everyone out here suffering. What are you doing for us?
Our job as Americans is to fight to save this country. We need bold actions, organizing. We can't allow ourselves to be divided.
It's really time to rise and fight.
I need all of y'all. Are you going to get in the streets and do something?
You can handle the responsibility of being a leader? Say it with your chest.
Dave and Sean, thank you so much for making this film. What brought you into this project?
So Andrea, this is a film.
Andrea, sorry,
Andrea, I'm sorry. I'm so sorry.
It's a joke on our show. I'm always correcting people on the show. They say my name.
I thought it was, and then I was talking to someone the other day, and they said Andrea, and I thought it was Andrea.
I love you, but go on.
All right, Andrea. So this is a film I've actually tried to make as far back as 2008. It came to me through Jeff Mann, who's also a childhood friend, who's a producer on the film. And he had got me into following the 2008 subprime crisis. And he was like, this is going to get bad. This is going to get bad for months. So I started following it. And as I watched it unfold, I wanted to make a documentary because the one thing I was really angry about was the bailouts and like the Obama administration, like, oh, with TARP and they're going to send them $1 trillion. And I'm like, this is crazy. And then I just started doing research. And I actually tried to go out and pitch doing something about that, and nobody was interested. They're like, oh, we'll just bail the banks out. Everything will be fine. And so march on down the road, a few years, like Sean and I were spending a lot of time together hanging out. And I was like, hey, we should do something on income inequality. Let's like broaden this out. And he was like, sure. So, we started filming like early as 2014. We went out and did some interviews. And we were trying to get it out for the 2016 election because we just thought that was such a big one because you had you had like Bernie on one side, Trump on one side, and then, Hillary wherever she lays in that right middle area kind of thing. And we just couldn't get it out in time for 2016. And we didn't think the story was quite there yet. So, fast forward to 2018, Sean's like, let's get back on the road filming. And him and I packed up his Volkswagen Golf station wagon and set across the country to Seattle.
Yeah, we shot in 23 states, met hundreds of people throughout the country, and we knew it was a problem, but we didn't realize that it was much worse than we had thought. And one of the reasons I wanted to get involved, my family comes from immigrants from Ireland, left out of abject poverty. My grandfather didn't have a pair of shoes when he was like 15. Comes to the United States, was basically a servant for a while. Then the New Deal gets put into place, and then we have labor protections. He was able to get a union job and ascend right into the middle class, and that changed the dynamic of my family and built the greatest middle class in the world. Now, it wasn't all inclusive. I want to say that, but and then watching my whole life, watching that path to the middle class erode, and the middle class erode, where you see like rural families are making half what they made in 1975, and wages are stagnant. And, this is happening on our watch, and we all have to do something about it. And that's why, we want to tell the emotional stories of people that it's devastated.
Tell us about the people you chose to focus on. I know with documentaries, especially a story as scary and immense as income inequality and the havoc it's wreaking on us now and will for the foreseeable future, and how destabilizing that is. And I just want to point out for our audience, when we talk about authoritarianism on this show and how it works, one of the ingredients that allows fascism to come to power and flourish is economic instability, economic vulnerability. And income inequality is worsening all that. So to tell such a big crisis story, how did you choose who to tell that through? Tell us about some of the people you profile in Americonned. Who are they and why did you choose them?
Basically, through activists, also Julian Hurley, who is one of the producers helped us find a bunch of people. And we were looking for different people that were in different parts of the economic strata. Having people working class people that are falling into extreme poverty, middle class people that are falling out of the middle class, and people in different places of the country. And we filmed a lot more people than that actually made it onto the film. We could probably do a 12-part series on this. It's just very sad to go around and just see how unstable everything is. We would see all these cars pulled off on the side of the road throughout America, and then I started putting it together. That was their last ride, right? Their car broke down, they pulled off, and they don't have money to fix it, they don't have money to tow it, and that's that. And then your whole world falls apart, and the children involved. It's a very sad state of affairs here.
And how did we get here?
So, this was all planned. 1968, 1970, Milton Friedman, his doctrine basically was the backlash to the New Deal. His basic mission statement is the sole purpose of corporations is to increase its profits. It's not helping society or the workers or anything. Then the Koch brothers and others took that doctrine and they pushed that through all the way to Mitch McConnell. They funded the judges, they funded the Congress to push these platforms and the think tanks. And it was a 40-year plan, and they won.
And was there any sort of pushback in the Democratic establishment where the Democrats co-opted to go along with it? What sort of resistance, if any, was put up over this 40-year period?
Obviously, the Republicans embraced it wholeheartedly, and then slowly, as the whole country shifted to the right, the Democrats followed, and they walked away from the workers. And then we have Clinton that signs NAFTA, and that was really the nail in the coffin for rural America and manufacturing in the United States. And then the country didn't help those people. In other countries, they retrained them, they got them jobs, they had social welfare programs between the gap, so that they could make it on to the next stage. But we didn't do any of that here.
So you focus a lot on Amazon, where the society across the board, across the U.S. has become massively dependent on Amazon. And you show in your film the efforts to unionize Amazon. What sort of challenges did they face? What sort of resistance did Amazon put up against that?
They spent $25 million to crush that union. First in Bessemer, and then another $25 million in Staten Island, New York, to try to crush that union. And, we're sort of seeing this building of this new labor movement, that we have these young people, we focus on Chris Smalls and Derek Palmer and like 7 other of their team that goes up against Amazon and eventually wins it. But, they had them arrested. They would change traffic patterns so that where they set up at the bus stop to greet people and try to talk to them about the unions. They would have the city change the bus route so that they could no longer set up near there. Or in Bessemer, Alabama, they took out a light because they were giving pamphlets out at a stop sign, at a red light. So they took that light out so that the people wouldn't ever stop there. I mean, hiring union buses, paying them $3,200 a day each, private investigators, getting followed by black SUVs. I mean, it's insanity.
It's corporate fascism.
And Amazon is the primary company in this film, but they're a stand-in for, hundreds of other companies. We also show companies that do great jobs and support their workers, and those workers do extremely well. Jeff Bezos could transform the middle class overnight if he raised his lowest wage to $30 an hour and gave good benefits. That would make all the other companies have to match that. And we would rebuild the middle class in like 2 years. He has the power to do that. Now, maybe he won't be the 4th richest person in the world. Maybe he'd be the 6th or the 8th. His life wouldn't change. But in the end, the insanity is he would make more money because more people have money to buy.
Given that, do you think we're at the point, or far past the point, where we need to start addressing greed as an addiction, just like we do with like sex addiction?
Yeah, it's funny you say that. Jeff Mann, the producer here, has been saying this for a long time, and I didn't agree with him at first, and now I think I do. That the billionaire, it's like a hoarder mental illness. Back in the 80s, they used to say, "Oh, what do you want? You want more, right?" Now I think they want it all.
Right. But what's going to be left?
That's the other insanity. If you destabilize the country so that the democracy frays and collapses, and that's what you're seeing, and you're 100% right about the authoritarianism, and we see it right now. The Democrats aren't doing the right thing, but the Republicans are marching toward fascism and authoritarianism because they know they can't give the people what they want. Not that they can't, they're not planning on it. So they want to take control, and they're using all these things, the same regurgitation of the 20s and 30s, the other, right? It's the refugee, it's the person coming across the border that's to blame. It's the Jewish people, that are to blame. It's the people that don't look like you or have, or gender or whatever, right? Using all this to divide and create hate. And then that's going to be if we all succumb to that, it'll be terrifying. But I really do have hope, seeing what's happening in the last 2 years.
Do you? Well, what's giving you hope?
You're seeing these unionizations of all these people coming together, whether it's educators, adjunct professors, nurses, Starbucks, Amazon's, Home Depot. There is a major resurgence from the young people are like, this is it. This is not working for us. And what we've seen happen just in Michigan this year in the last 4 or 5 months, that's kind of the model, right? What they've been able to achieve by getting back the state government should be the model for the country.
Absolutely. And so let's talk about automation and AI, because as you mentioned just now, the far right scapegoating of non-white people, immigrants, LGBTQ people, just the scapegoating culture wars that they're waging to try to create this enemy to bash, to unite their base around, to distract from the fact that it's the corporate genocidal class that's really creating the problems. So the big villain in all this has really been automation. Obviously, corporate greed and greed as a mental illness, as an illness that has to get addressed, is what's driving all this. But one of the weapons I would say is automation, and with it, the coming AI revolution. So could you talk about, in your years of research and reporting and making this documentary, what did you see about the impacts of automation, and what do you see coming down the pipe with further automation and AI?
Yeah, so certainly, we're seeing the beginnings of it. I think this is going to be the NAFTA of the white collar. And also, we're going to lose all the driving jobs, right? Which is 5 million in the country. The Ubers will not have people in it. The trucks will not have people in it. But the stockbrokers, I don't know, 50 to 80% of them will be gone. We don't need contractual lawyers. We probably won't need them in 2 years. The CEO of IBM proudly said, gleefully said, he's going to eliminate all back office workers that can be replaced with AI as soon as possible. He's backtracked that. Like, his PR people came in and backtracked that. But that's what he said. We should believe people when they say that the first time. And I think our stat is 47% of American jobs are at high risk of being automated or being eliminated by AI. But I think that because we finished the edit in the fall, since ChatGPT 4 came out, I think we might have underestimated that.
Wow. And so we've seen over the decades factory jobs, worker jobs in the Midwest become decimated by automation. And now you have the so-called white collar jobs. You listed some. Do you see what's happened to the factory jobs across the Midwest happening to the media jobs, the arts and entertainment jobs, the cultural jobs, and so on, that occupy the big cities, New York City, San Francisco, LA, and so on? Do you see that that's another big decimation, a big ticking time bomb is about to be set off in the next 10 years?
I mean, I think that basically you have 8 CEOs who run the big 8 media companies, And last year they made, and this is what they made, not future options or whatever, about 100 million each. And they're actively trying to crush the writers union and the SAG-AFTRA because they don't want to pay. They want it all. And, I would love to see a CEO write a screenplay or pick up a camera and make a movie. It would probably be laughable.
What do you say to someone who wants to sit back and get paid for essentially doing nothing, or just, showing up to do just the work they're interested in and letting everyone else carry the load, carry the weight, and be unfairly paid? What would you say to that person? And they're going to justify it saying, well, I'm powerful, I'm a celebrity, I am a name, go fuck yourself. Like, they're going to have their own justification in their head. Like, oh, that's unfair to me. You're a bunch of socialists, or you're being selfish or greedy, or how dare you think about yourself. So we've seen all these arguments coming out. But so what would you say to that person, like, to kind of break through to their mentality?
So Nick Hanauer, who's in our film, who's done very well for himself, states it perfectly. With a country with the levels of income inequality and wealth inequality that we have here in America, there's three historical outcomes. It's authoritarian rule, a police state, or a revolution. All of those things are extremely bad. To lose the democracy here is worth your not paying people enough to survive. What are you going to do? You're going to live in a bunker? You're going to live in a bunker in New Zealand? They're going to come for you. And we fixed this before. Again, I have hope. We fixed this before. We can fix it again. We just have to get to work. And we can't be depressed. We can't be cynical. And it's hard not to be. I understand. But if they could do it in Michigan, they could do it all throughout the country. And if we could all stand up and work together.
How did they do it? What strategies were most effective?
Well, they did it from the inside out. They worked there, as opposed to the outside in, with more traditional unions. So they identify with the people. Their friends were in there. Their coworkers were in there. They spoke the language. They knew the ins and outs. And they could stand up at meetings, right, at these anti-union indoctrination meetings, and say, that's false. So that was powerful. And then the more the management came down on them, the more sympathetic they became. And they worked day and night, 7 days a week for like 300 days during snowstorms, ice storms, tornado hit them. They lost 8 tents, blew away. They just were all in, and that resonated with people. And you can move mountains, I think, if you come together and work that hard.
And what benefits did they reap from all that?
So that still remains to be seen. They're negotiating a contract, right? They won the vote, and now, of course, Amazon's dragging their feet and stalling. But traditionally, it's much better wages, pensions, health insurance, and you're not able to fire anyone for no reason, right? If you go to the bathroom too many times in Amazon, you're fired by a text message.
Mm-hmm.
So none of them drink water because they can't go pee. So they pass out all the time. I mean, it's horrific.
Yep. And so what advice do you have for people listening in any line of work? Where should they start if they want to unionize their company?
I know that Chris and Derek are very open to getting them information on how to do it from the inside out. Then there's also the AFL-CIO, which will support them. Chris and Derek went a different route, and they won, and then the traditional route with the AFL-CIO. Just get the people together. That's the main thing. The collective action an organization can go up against and win against organized money.
Given all that you've come across in your reporting, do you think a universal basic income is the answer, given how automation and AI are going to be sped up in the coming decade plus? Like, we're going to have a new industrial boom driven by machines, which is going to put a massive amount of people out of work inevitably.
Yeah, so if we want to survive People get caught up with socialism and capitalism. These are just economic systems that were invented. The thing that we have to really focus on is democracy, even democratic republic, which means it's us, right? So we should be the ones that determine the outcomes, not the lobbyists. And a universal income would be great, I think. I think we have to think long and hard about, what's going to happen, because we're going to have a couple dozen trillionaires and we'll all be living in tents, or we can make it fairer now, as Kurt Anderson in our film says. If we don't make it fairer now, it's going to be really bad later.
And I want to tell people, because I know there's a debate going on, how much AI could actually do and how we still are years from any sort of big revolution on that front and so on. But the reality is that where there's a will, there's a way. And it's obvious, as you mentioned, that our corporate overlords certainly have the will to put a lot of people to engineer layoffs. They've got that Jack Welch strategy. They want to feed the beast of their shareholders. So certainly they're looking for this, like they're angling for this. So it's just a matter of time. And so, as you said, now is the time for everyone to get together and unionize and organize and demand not just the unionizing, but demanding this social safety net from our elected public officials.
Yeah, and then at the same time, they're talking about getting rid of Social Security and Medicare and Medicaid. I mean, it's complete insanity. There's so much money here, right? In much smaller countries and much lesser countries, they have all this stuff in place.
Right. And they're much happier too. The Scandinavian countries rank the highest on the happiness index. And meanwhile, in America, we're miserable and fighting each other. And this is why. It's the corporate greed that's really driving that misery. One thing I don't understand is it's so easy to lose it all. It's so easy. It just takes these families that are built on inherited wealth. It wouldn't take much for one generation to squander all that wealth, to place some bad bets, to trust a Bernie Madoff Ponzi scheme with the family's inheritance and so on. It wouldn't take much to fall from a great fortune. And once you do, society isn't built currently to carry you. So I'm looking at all these immensely rich people and just how out of touch they are and how convinced they are that this will never happen to them.
I mean, you look at our country, like everyone is like a paycheck away from bankruptcy. I think like something like 56% of the country has like $400 less in their account. But what I've been seeing is the transfer of wealth. And, what we've seen in the since 1980 is like $50 trillion of wealth go from the bottom 90% to the top 1%. And I find that is the most staggering figure. So now we're getting this disparity between the haves and have-nots that's unbreakable. And one of the things that I saw in my research was I was looking at like Rome and how Rome fell. And, it wasn't more or less like barbarians like storming the gates. It was income inequality where, 95% of the Roman Empire was living in poverty, and they had a massive bureaucratic infrastructure that was too hard to support, and they had a sprawling military trying to defend their empire. And those are the things that bring empires down. So, I mean, as Sean had said, we're going to end up with like 12 trillionaires and then everyone else, feeding off scraps. I think the disparity has just gotten so out of whack. It's just going to be those 12 and, the other 8 billion of us sitting here, trying to make ends meet. And that's the way it's going. I don't see another way.
Mm-hmm. And the Golden Girls knew it. I just watched a Christmas episode where the ladies were serving at a soup kitchen in a church. And Dorothy's ex-husband, Stanley, came dressed as Santa Claus because his latest get-rich-quick scheme failed. And the big lesson that he learned was to appreciate what he has, because many Americans, which we don't realize, are just a paycheck away from poverty, from being in the soup kitchen on Christmas Eve.
Yeah, and some of the other numbers that like we have in the film that really catch people's eyes is like 45% of the country is making $10.25 an hour or under. And we're still discussing, the fight for 15, where for me, that's like 15 years ago. It's nowhere even close. Like when I started the research of this film, what really got me going on it was LBJ's 1965 War on Poverty speech. And I started going through the numbers. I'm like, okay, what was the minimum wage in 1965? It was like $1.25 an hour. So, fast forward in like 2009, it's like an extra $6. So, when you start, extrapolating those numbers, Barry Ritholtz touches off on this. We're looking at like, it should be like 22 to 24 an hour as the minimum wage. Like we're so far behind with 15. 15 doesn't even cut it. And we're looking at like 44% of those this country's not even making 10.25 an hour. I mean, it's so out of whack. I mean, I just don't know how we continue on. Eventually it has to collapse. I mean, you just can't live like this anymore. I mean, it just gets worse and worse.
Mm-hmm. President Biden likes to tout himself as a pro-union president. He has some union organizing in his family history. Do you think that's a fair assessment? How do you think he's been on this front?
So I think that he has been better than any president in my adult life, with a caveat. Certainly if Manchin and Sinema had voted, we could have had a pretty amazing law put into place that would have really strengthened everything.
The Build Back Better.
Yeah. But then also, at the same time, Pelosi and the Biden administration in the fall made a law to crush the transportation strike, the train operator strike. I had no hopes for Biden, and then he kind of outshined what I thought. And then that happened, and I was like, oh my God, come on. Ugh.
Sean and I both had that same assessment of Biden. We were like, here we go again. It's like another right center Democrat who's going to, just kowtow to the Republicans. And, he has surprised us. I think he's been better pro-labor president than I had expected, like bringing in like Marty Walsh. He's left, but, bringing him in as Secretary of Labor, I think was a nice move because he's so pro-labor and worked so hard in Boston. And he's also in our film, but, he was leading some big union initiatives in Boston for years. And they've been really successful. And we document those in the film, I think, really well on how successful those types of programs can be for people.
Yeah, I think the problem is that both the Democratic and Republican Party establishments, they feed from the same trough. They take money from the same big corporate donors. So they're all on the hook in delivering for them.
Yeah, and we show that in the film. The same people that created this plan, basically, to take down unions also donated hundreds of millions of dollars to law schools and create the Federal Society. And then Mitch McConnell realized smartly, but diabolically, that if he could take the Supreme Court, then even if they do pass laws to help people, that they could strike them down as unconstitutional. And then, of course, Citizens United, which was really devastating for our democracy. That's in the film as well.
It's extraordinary what you capture. Americonned is a must-watch film to ground people in this moment that we're in and how we got here. And I think the more we are reminded of the recent history, the facts, the better we are to see what our options are and how we fight back.
Yeah, 100%. You can't unsee the film.
Exactly right.
Even like conservative people that have watched this film are kind of blown away. It's not a partisan film. We call out both parties. And I do want to say the Democrats are not living up to this. And I think that if we can hold on for maybe another presidential cycle or two, I don't think they're going to be able to win again. Just in the core 4 years, people are waking up, and I really do have hope. We just have to make it through the next 4-6 years.
What do you mean by that? Like, we have to stay engaged election cycle after election cycle, fight for the lesser evil on the ballot every time.
Yeah, and then especially at the local levels, because that's what they did, right? That's what the right did. They really put a lot of money into the local elections, and then you get to draw the maps for the gerrymandering, right? The election maps. And the Democrats kind of like, they don't focus on the local elections. And that's the basis of everything. If you get to decide how the maps are drawn up, then you get to decide, who wins.
Mm-hmm.
If you look at it, it's all about, stuffing the judicial system. And, we touch on that a lot. And that was, that's been their approach. Think about it. I mean, the Republicans have won one popular presidential vote in 30 years, and they put 6 justices on the Supreme Court. We have a president about to be indicted for a second time who put 3 justices himself on the Supreme Court. I mean, that's frightening. And, you're seeing it. And that's the one thing that people have missed, or where Sean touched on is, and I believe this firmly since, I was in college, was like, the most effect you're going to have is on the local level, because you can affect changes around you. You can get to your representatives easily. Those are the places you push. And now you see it. So they pack the courts. So now they can just gerrymander districts. Like, they're crazy when you look at some of the maps. I'm like, how did they get that shape? It's like, it's completely insane at this point. But I mean, I think that's what we have to do is like, one, we got to, the courts, because everything's, geared, I mean, money buys you justice. Money buys you whatever you want. Money buys you power. And I think that's where we're at right now.
That local state representative, that local state senator, then becomes a congressperson, right? And that congressperson then becomes a senator. Your state senator, they don't just jump in. Normally, they don't just jump into a Congress position. That's much more rare. So by taking back the local houses and having fair maps, look at Texas, right? It's so gerrymandered. That's the only reason it's still a right-wing state.
And I have to remind people that America is one of those very rare democracies that has gerrymandering. Another democracy, in theory anyway, is Hungary, which is keeping in power Viktor Orban thanks to gerrymandering. So gerrymandering is extremely unusual. And the UN even issued an emergency report over America's gerrymandering crisis. This isn't normal.
No, I mean, look, like 2 of my favorite like weird gerrymandered districts are like Crenshaw's and Texas, and then look at like Jim Jordan's in Ohio. Like, it's like, what are those shapes? Like, what are these? This is crazy.
Yeah, and the U.S. Senate, with every state getting 2 senators, regardless of
abolish the Senate.
Yeah, exactly.
I'm with Thomas Paine was right on that. Go unicameral.
Mm-hmm.
It's like, I mean, he was there to keep slavery.
Exactly.
Keep slavery in the books. I mean, it's ridiculous. I mean, the fact that like Sean's neighborhood in Brooklyn has more people than like all of Wyoming, it's insane, Yeah. It's like absolutely insane. But yeah, for me, the Senate could just go. I'm all about unicameral.
And then speaking of Hungary, so Hungary, he was able to eliminate the independent judiciary, so he can basically overrule the judiciary. And he was also able to eliminate the free press. And then we watched the Republican CPAC the last several years has been having their meeting in Hungary. So this is their model that they want to bring here. And we're seeing in Poland, they got rid of their judiciary. They still have a free press.
Well, they're actually taking over the state media across Poland. They've done that.
Okay, so then that's fallen, and they've just put out a bill that probably will pass, that the current administration can keep anyone they want from running for office.
I think in America too, we have this like immunity to history. Like, we're special. Like, we're, these things can't happen to us. But I assure you they can. Like, oh, we'll never be fascist. It's like, no. Like, we're not immune to these things, But Americans have that view, like, oh, it can never happen here. And, look what it's happening. I mean, these are blueprint cases of fascism, I mean, we're headed straight down that path, and faster than we thought. And I've been like saying this for decades, that we're heading down that path. And like, everyone's like, that could never happen here. And now people, thinking, man, maybe you were right.
Well, they took the Capitol.
Yeah.
Luckily, they didn't hold it.
Yeah, exactly right. And it's been a 40-year plan in the making, as you point out.
Yeah, it's actually 50. You look at it, it's really, how I looked at it was like 73. You always hear 1973 sort of that watershed year. Because you look, when LBJ, his war on poverty was very effective. Like, when he started, I believe the poverty level was like 24 to 25%. And by the time Nixon was really dismantling all his social programs, by 1973, it had been halved to about 11, like it was down to like 11%, 12%. It clearly was working. And then they just started dismantling it about 1973. You have that year is just such a number ingrained in my head with everything. And then, it just shifted. And then, you see the Democrats, kind of jumped on board with them. Carter was a big, free enterprise president. And then, Clinton, Obama, they were very pro-business and less for the workers. I mean, look at it. It's like we haven't had a minimum wage raise in 14 years now. It's crazy.
Yeah, and what was the raise? 25 cents, 50 cents?
Yeah, it was 20. Obama raised it 25 cents. So, well, hey, let's not sneeze at $2 a day.
Yeah, totally.
What is next for your film Americonned?
Well, it streams in North America. It's been in theaters. We've had great, discussions afterwards. But right now, you can get it on Apple TV, iTunes, Prime Video, Vudu, Google Play, Microsoft, and there'll be more coming up.
Yeah, and we're seeing like the Q&As have been really great. Like people are really engaged, and now we're starting to get because this has been a real like self-distribution thing with us. Because this is something you can't get big corporations to put a film out like this or give us money or things like that. So a lot of it was, it's been a grassroots campaign from the beginning. And now we're starting to see is like I'm getting emails and the rest of the team from like theaters around the country, like, oh, we'd like to show your film, and we're like, whoa, really? And so it's starting to take on a little life of that where hopefully it'll, create a groundswell and people, start looking at unions. And as we see, like the approval in unions is like up over 70% now. That's the highest it's been in decades. And that's great for us. And hopefully, that's going to turn the tide. And like every day watching, I see a strike, or I've recently relocated to Austin and I see all these restaurants unionizing, and it's great. And it's like, it gives me a little bit of hope where I was like the most pessimistic person, but I'm seeing some stuff, and especially all the work we've done with like Chris and Derek and what they've done with Amazon, like, those guys, I wanted to quit making this film. I was like, after we lost in Alabama, I was so despondent, and those guys did not quit. They did not quit. They went back to Staten Island. They learned their lessons in Alabama, and they keep learning their lessons. And I think they're making an effective change. And I think, especially with young people, I think they really appeal to the younger crowd, like Chris and Derek. I think they inspire young people a lot. So it's great to see that.
And that's the lesson of your documentary, Americonned. We cannot quit. We're all in this for the marathon. And if we fight our fight, then the ones we pass the baton to coming up behind us, they'll have an easier time and they'll ultimately win.
100%. 100%.
Well, you keep getting the word out. You guys are getting the word out. So it's important to have journalism like yours that, isn't skirting over this topic and, isn't co-opted by, some big corporate money. Unless I don't know it's something.
It's me and a Patreon and a mic. You're
The thing that people don't remember or weren't alive for were that in the 60s and 70s, you could work in a hardware store and have a house and a car and a vacation and have a great life. Or you can be a cashier and have a house and a car and a pension, right? There is more than enough money for all of that. There's more now than there was then. The profits are higher. The productivity is higher. It's just insane. And one thing that I want to say is people on government assistance in this country, 70% work full time. The welfare queen is a myth used to, now I'm sure that there are some people that are scamming the system, but
not as much as those at the top.
Yeah. Oh, certainly. And the Senate or whatever.
They've got the accountants and lawyers to do it.
Yeah. We see that in the film well.
If 70% are working full time, right? And probably like 15% are like on chemo or just had a heart or whatever, right? And then some people are mentally ill. There's such a small amount. And then it's like, we're just like, as Nick Hanauer says in the film, the minimum standard we have to hold capitalism to is to pay people enough not to be on government assistance. That's the minimum.
Well, you both have a standing invite on Gaslit Nation. If you want to come back heading into the presidential to see where things stand, give us an update, you're more than welcome to. Income inequality is the key crisis driving everything right now. That's the big puppet master behind all these dark forces, these dark personalities. Trump is just a big dancing orange clown with the corporate class Death Eaters behind him, moving the strings. And that's what we all have to keep in mind. And watch Americonned. There's several places you can get it. Certainly not on Amazon, right?
Yes, it is.
It's on Amazon.
Oh, it is? Oh, great. What a delicious way to watch it.
Our discussion continues, and you can get access to that by signing up on our Patreon at the Truth Teller level or higher.
We encourage you to donate to help rescue and recovery efforts in Turkey and Syria following the devastating earthquakes in early February. To help people in Turkey, visit the TPF Türkiye Earthquake Relief Fund at tpfund.org.
To help Syrians in need, donate to the White Helmets at whitehelmets.org. We also encourage you to help support Ukraine by donating to Razom for Ukraine at razomforukraine.org. In addition, we encourage you to donate to the International Rescue Committee, a humanitarian relief organization helping refugees from Ukraine, Syria, and Afghanistan. Donate at rescue.org. And if you want to help critically endangered orangutans already under pressure from the palm oil industry, donate to the Orangutan Project at theorangutanproject.org and avoid products with palm oil. Gaslit Nation is produced by Sarah Kenzier and Andrea Chalupa. If you like what we do, leave us a review on iTunes. It helps us reach more listeners. And check out our Patreon. It keeps us going.
Our production manager is Nicholas Torres, and our associate producer is Carlin Daigle. Our episodes are edited by Nicholas Torres, and our Patreon exclusive content is edited by Carlin Daigle.
Original music in Gaslit Nation is produced by David Whitehead, Martin Vissenberg, Nick Farr, Damian Arriaga, and Carlin Daigle.
Our logo design was donated to us by Hamish Smith of the New York-based firm Order. Thank you so much, Hamish.
Gaslit Nation would like to thank our supporters at the producer level on Patreon and higher with the help of Judge Lackey, the narrator of the new Gaslit Nation graphic novel, Dictatorship. It's easier than you think. If you're supporting the show at the producer level or higher on Patreon, thank you so much. If you do not hear your name, you may need to go into your Patreon account and just select your level of support manually to make sure that your name gets into our end credits. So one person that needs to do that is my mother, Tanya Chalupa. I had to find her. She was getting annoyed that she wasn't hearing her name in the end credits. Mom, you got to change your manual level of support on Patreon. Thank you for supporting me all these years. I love you. Withrow C. Newell,
Chickwin,
Lily Wachowski,
Sean Rubin,
Todd S. Pearlstein,
Kenny Main,
John Schoenthaler,
Ellen McGirt,
Joel Ferran,
Larry Gasson,
Karen A. Deal,
Nico Phillips,
Brian E. Castor,
Tatiana Birsch,
Karen Heisler,
Ann Bertino,
Chris Bravo, Ruth Ann Harnish,
John Millett,
David East,
Aida,
Joseph Mara Jr.,
Julie Matthews,
Meganopolis,
Mark,
Barbara Kittredge,
Matthew Womack,
Sean Berg,
Kristen Kuster,
Kai Gillis,
Sharon Hatrick,
William Barry Reeves,
Richard Smith,
Emmy,
Kevin Gannon,
Mike Christensen,
Sandra Kalnins,
Katie Masuris,
Emily Fenning,
James D. Leonard,
Leo Chalupa.
That's my dad, leave him alone.
Oh, wow.
Carol Golstad,
Jason Benke,
Marcus J. Trent,
Joe Darcy,
Ann Marshall,
Jeremy Lewis,
Trigve,
D.L. Singfield,
Matt Perez,
Nicole Spear,
Abby Road,
Margaret Romero,
Jans Alstrup Rasmussen,
I don't know how to pronounce this.
ZW,
Okay, ZW,
Kathy Kavanaugh,
Sarah Gray,
Jennifer Ann Luter,
John Ripley,
Ethan Mann,
Leah Campbell,
Jared Lombardo.
You are all to report to the Ron DeSantis Re-Education Center, formerly known as Disney's Animal Kingdom, immediately.